The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Perspectives. My name is David Schoeneman and I'm your host on this program. I'm also the alderman for Ward 3 here in Nashua. On Perspectives, as you know if you've tuned in the past, we take a look at a variety of issues on a state, local, or national level that are of importance to Nashua residents and taxpayers. We do this to keep you informed, especially when elections are coming up. Well, here we are about 10 days before the 2016 general election as we tape this in the studio. And of course, this is the big item on our agenda nationally in these next 10 days or so, the run-up to the presidential election. And of course, the host of other elections that are happening across the country and certainly here in New Hampshire. We have a gubernatorial race, we have a Senate race, and we have others down the ticket. As we begin today's segment, I want to tell you a story, share a story that happened to me a few days ago down at City Hall. I was in the city clerk's office for some business that I had to conduct there, and I overheard a conversation down the counter. Someone was registering to vote. And as this person was registering to vote, I wasn't eavesdropping, but you hear these conversations. I heard the person behind the desk ask the person registering, "What party do you wish to register for?" And the person registering said, "Gee, I don't know. What are my choices?" And the clerk said, "Well, you can be Republican or Democrat or Independent." And the person registering thought about it for a little bit and said, "Gee, I really don't know. Who are the candidates and who's in which party?" And here we were a couple of weeks before election, and I'm hearing this conversation. I wondered to myself, how many voters 2 weeks before the election don't know what parties are available to register in when you register to vote here in New Hampshire and don't know who the candidates are. Now, I think it's very important that people vote. I'm not critical of people that aren't informed. We do this show so that you can be informed. There are a few things that I think about when I see this election coming up, characteristics of this election cycle. One is the unethical behavior. That seems to be showcased all the time on the news and the newspapers. Unethical behavior. We'll talk about unethical behavior in a little bit. Another trend that I see is scripted rhetoric and spin. Scripted rhetoric. I think scripted rhetoric is probably one of the biggest drivers for Donald Trump's success in the primaries. He was someone who didn't come in with a standard platform. It wasn't the same old message from the same old parade of candidates. And I think that's partly the reason for his success. Beyond those two characteristics, unethical behavior on the part of many candidates and scripted rhetoric and people being tired of it, I think the number one issue that we're facing as a nation is national defense. So when we cut through the unethical behavior and we cut through the scripted rhetoric, hopefully we'll hear something about national defense. Now I want to tell you too that as an alderman in Ward 3, or in the city of Nashua, I serve in a nonpartisan office. The alderman, it's a nonpartisan race, and I'm not up for election this year. Municipal elections are in the odd years, so we were last elected in 2015, and of course in 2017 will be our next election, 2-year terms for the alderman. In 2016 and other even years, we have all of the partisan races up at Concord. We have, of course, partisan races for U.S. Congress, and periodically we have Senate races, U.S. Senate races. Of course, those seats are 6-year seats, and so 2 years ago we had Jeanne Shaheen up, and this year we have Kelly Ayotte up. And of course, this year too we have the presidential race. So now, although I occupy a nonpartisan office and I try to conduct myself in a nonpartisan manner, I believe in representation. So I represent the people in Ward 3, whatever their political party may be. I happen to be a Republican, by the way. Full disclosure, I want you to know that, as I think most of you already do know. But we're talking about partisan races this year, and I think that's probably where some of the, a lot of the scripted rhetoric seems to occur. Let's take a look first at the race for U.S. Senate. We have incumbent Kelly Ayotte being challenged by Governor Hassan. Of course, New Hampshire governor, she's been governor for a couple of terms. And I want to share some of the things that I've been seeing and reading. I want to start with an endorsement that was given by the Nashua Telegraph on October 23rd, 2016, just a week or so ago. The Telegraph came out in favor of Senator Ayotte and her incumbency and continuing in office. And I think that's great. I certainly support that. A couple of things I would like to point out in the article, and if you haven't had a chance to read it, I'd recommend that you do. Just look up the Telegraph online, or if you have an old stack of newspapers like we have at home, take a look through there and look at October 23rd. The staff editorial at the Telegraph endorses Kelly Ayotte. The fourth paragraph down, I'm just going to highlight a few of the points here. It says that Ayotte has a proven track record of bipartisanship, which is desperately needed at the federal level. That is a completely true statement, and I could not agree with it more, which is one of the reasons that I support her. She has a proven track record of bipartisanship. I will say what I've learned in being an alderman, serving in a nonpartisan race or nonpartisan body, we have a chance to be bipartisan all the time because the partisan lines aren't quite as clearly drawn. Certainly, if you watch the aldermanic meetings, you'll see a partisan bias. You'll see those who like to spend, that's the other side, and those who like to save and look out for the taxpayer, that's my side. But we are able to work, not across an aisle, because we don't really have an aisle. We're able to work with each other. We operate on a bipartisan level in the Board of Aldermen, and I see that it works very, very well, much better than the partisan kind of bickering that we see all the time. And so when a candidate comes forward and takes a strong partisan line with all the basic touchstone kind of issues ready at hand with the rhetoric, compared to someone who has a bipartisan approach and wants to solve problems, for me the choice is easy. And I think we see that in Senator Ayotte. And the Telegraph sees it too. Telegraph is sometimes a little more on the liberal side, but here they are endorsing someone who they say is clearly a good financial conservative. Ayotte has a proven track record of bipartisanship, which is desperately needed at the federal level. I agree. They also mention a few things about Governor Hassan. And what they say, again, about Ayotte and Hassan, a little further down in the article, it says here, I'm just going to quote it to you. Ayotte is a less scripted policymaker and easily touts stronger foreign policy experience. I like this on two counts. One, it's saying essentially that Governor Hassan is scripted. If you listen to Governor Hassan's rhetoric, it's definitely party line. It's about expanded Medicaid. It's about more spending. It's about all the cliche taglines that occur that really, I think, upset people. And having learned what I have being in a nonpartisan office, it bothers me too. I don't like scripted rhetoric. I don't mind Governor Hassan personally. I don't know her very well. I don't know Senator Ayotte very well either. But I don't like seeing scripted rhetoric or hearing scripted rhetoric because it speaks of partisanship. So the Telegraph says that Hassan essentially says that Hassan is scripted and Senator Ayotte is not. And it's secondly in that statement, it says that Senator Ayotte easily touts stronger foreign policy experience. We'll talk a little bit about foreign policy or national defense issues in a bit, but this is clearly, I think, given where we're at in this nation now, the largest issue that we're facing. Ayotte has the experience, and she is not scripted. Further down the article, it says here that Ayotte and Hassan have some clear differences, and of course they do. We believe, again, we the Telegraph believe Ayotte is right that Obamacare is a disaster and needs to be repealed and replaced. Now, I said that Governor Hassan has been speaking on or favored expanded Medicaid coverage, the expanded Obamacare essentially, in New Hampshire, and this is costing taxpayers a huge amount of money, not only in taxes, but it's costing us in premiums. And we've seen, of course, that there's a rise in Obamacare premiums. Now, we haven't been hit too hard in New Hampshire. I saw the article the other day. It hasn't been too terribly bad in this state. But clearly across the country, Obamacare is a disaster. And it's wrong to pretend that it's not. And I think that Hassan is following the script and is sticking with Obamacare expansion, whereas Senator Ayotte says that it needs to be repealed and replaced. Again, Obamacare did nothing to reduce the cost of health care. It just made someone else pay for it. And that's not a solution to a problem. As Obama said, it is about redistribution. So think about those things as we take a look at the Senate race. I favor and endorse Senator Ayotte because she's not scripted and she deals in truth. The truth is that Obamacare is a disaster, and we don't want someone with just partisan rhetoric. That's not a solution in Washington. I think Hassan embodies and continues to repeat the partisan scripted rhetoric. Again, these are Telegraph's words, which I fully endorse. Let's move over to the gubernatorial race. Gubernatorial race, we have Sununu and Van Ostern. Of course, Hassan is giving up the seat as governor, and so we're going to have a new governor one way or the other. Let's talk about ethics. Van Ostern, there have been some articles about Van Ostern, and of course about Hassan too, and the pay-to-play trend that seems to be occurring, certainly on the national level with all the news we've heard about Hillary Clinton. And it's also playing out both in the Senate race with Governor Hassan, we'll talk about that in a moment, and in the gubernatorial race with Colin Van Ostern. Again, I'm looking at the Telegraph. This is an opinion piece on Thursday, October 27th. And this is a guest editorial, so it's not the newspaper's editorial itself, and this is submitted by Jennifer Horn, who is the chairwoman of the New Hampshire Republican Party. Now, as chairwoman of the New Hampshire Republican Party, we can expect her to have a Republican bias. I say that to you because I want to make sure that you understand the source. Whenever we hear an opinion, we should always ask ourselves what the source is. Now, I respect Jennifer Horn. I believe that she is speaking truth, and just because truth favors one candidate from the other doesn't mean that there's bias. Truth doesn't have a bias. I think that the truth is truth, and we need to stick to it. Apparently, there was a pay-to-play deal going on. If you've been reading the papers, you know about the contract with Dartmouth-Hitchcock, or with Centene, which was the Medicaid expansion program. Governor Hassan opted for a no-bid contract that she awarded to Centene to administer Medicaid expansion, and shortly thereafter, she got a $34,000 campaign contribution from executives in that group. Colin Van Ostern, likewise, approved the contract, as did Sununu. We'll talk about his approval in a moment. But there were $50,000 of campaign contributions from Dartmouth-Hitchcock and its affiliates, according to an article in New Hampshire Union Leader, again, Thursday, October 27th, today. So we have pay-to-play taking place in the gubernatorial race and in the Senate race, where contracts are awarded to parties that make political contributions to Democrats. If these things are occurring on the Republican side, and I'm not saying that they're not somewhere, I think they'd be news. They're not occurring. I don't hear them occurring at all. This is occurring on the Democrat side. This is unethical, clearly. And if we listen to Colin Van Ostern's response to this, he tries to paint Sununu as trying to make a political point out of a very serious matter of this contract. Sununu is not trying to make a political point. He's trying to establish the necessity and the importance of transparency and openness in government. I support that. Now, I support Sununu for governor. I don't know him personally either. I don't know Colin Van Ostern personally. But based on the things that I'm seeing, I see unethical behavior and I see scripted rhetoric coming out of Van Ostern. I see it coming out of Hassan, and of course, I see it coming out of Hillary Clinton. We'll talk about the presidential race a little bit down the way. So on the gubernatorial race and in the Senate race, we see the two things that I highlighted back in the beginning, unethical behavior, and we see scripted rhetoric. Now, why is this occurring? Let's transition to the presidential race. And the main reason that I think the presidential race is always the most important. And I mentioned earlier that we have national defense as the key issue. It's the key issue. But there is something more important, even more important than that, that comes through in a presidential race. I don't think Governor Hassan would be using pay to play in New Hampshire. I don't think Colin Van Ostern would be using pay to play in New Hampshire if it wasn't seen as the way that Hillary Clinton has been so successful and the Clintons themselves have been so successful at making money. They're the ones who are setting the example. Hillary Clinton's example, I think, is driving Governor Hassan to do the same thing that Hillary does. And I think Governor Hassan's example is driving Colin Van Ostern to do the same thing that Governor Hassan is. So the presidential race is key not only for the critical issues, but it's key because of the example that is set for 4 years certainly, and quite possibly for 8 years. So what do we have as our choices going into the election in 10 days? We've got Hillary Clinton on the one side and we've got Donald Trump. Now, I'm a Republican. I will say here, as I've said before on this show, other episodes we've talked about candidates during the primaries, that I did not support Donald Trump in the primary. In fact, I supported Governor Walker when he came out. I thought that he would be good. I thought he did some very good things in Wisconsin. He was successful there. I heard him speaking in various times on the news, and I really thought that he exhibited leadership in some very difficult times. I like that in a person. He was successful without caving, and he stood by his principles. These are great things. When he dropped out of the race, I transitioned to Ben Carson. I chose Ben Carson for the reasons I'm explaining now, that I really think this country needs someone who has a good heart. Maybe we can say a good bedside manner, someone who is going to restore confidence and faith in our elected officials. We needed a good person in office. And I just see the wounding of this country. I see the division. I see the bipartisan, or the partisan bickering, not bipartisan, that's for sure. I see the partisan bickering. And I felt that Dr. Ben Carson would heal some of that, and that's who I voted for. Of course, he ultimately dropped out of the race, and we're where we're at with Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump is a bit of a bore. I don't think I'm unable to say that on TV here in Nashua, but he's not my favorite kind of a person. So we've got someone on the one side who I'm not real wild about, and someone on the other side, Hillary Clinton, who I think is far worse. And again, not a partisan position. A partisan position is not what's driving my vote. It's the necessity, again, the reason I voted for Ben Carson, it's the necessity of getting rid of unethical behavior and being done with scripted rhetoric and spin. In Hillary Clinton, we have unethical behavior. Every day, news comes out about whether it's email scandal or Benghazi or pay to play with the Clinton Foundation or Bill Clinton Inc. We see a lot of money has been made by the Clintons charging fees for playing really with the State Department or getting involved in U.S. government, getting contracts. This is completely unacceptable. Secondly, we have lying. Lying is completely unacceptable. The problem with lying is that once someone lies to you, you can never again trust them. Never again. If Hillary Clinton were to tell me that the sun is shining outside, I have to step outside and check because I cannot believe her on any level. Now, I saw a political cartoon one time in one of the local papers here not too long ago where one person was saying how difficult, how scary the situation is in the world with terrorism and with the economy and with drug crisis and all the long list of things that are going wrong in the country and in the world right now. And another person said, so you're going to vote for Hillary Clinton because you believe she has all the answers? And then the first person said, once again, no, but I just want to be lied to. There is a sense that if we don't know what's happening, we'll somehow feel better. The ignorance is bliss. And maybe some people just want to be lied to and be told that everything is okay. I'm not one of those people. I'm a pilot. I'm sure I've mentioned that on the air here before. If I'm flying along and a co-pilot says, hey, Captain, the right engine's on fire, what should I do about that? Should I pretend it doesn't exist? No, I can't. We have to solve our problems. Pilots have to solve our problems, and most of us as adults living in Nashua and living in America have to solve all our problems too. It does no good to pretend they don't exist. If you've got an ache or a pain, do you pretend it doesn't exist, or you go to the doctor and get a diagnosis? It's better to get a diagnosis. We don't want to live under a false pretense that everything is okay when it's not. And Hillary Clinton lies about what's going on. She lied about Benghazi. She lied about her email server. She lied about pay to play, and on and on and on. I'm a man. I'm a pilot. I don't want to be lied to. I cannot accept that. We have a little baby boy at home right now, and this child is going to be growing up in a world that I'm leaving behind. And I don't want that child growing up listening to falsehoods all the time. So I'm going to support Donald Trump. Again, I don't know him either. But although he's a bit rough, and that's probably putting it mildly, I know that he's insulted a lot of people. And you have my personal apology for that. I don't like to insult anybody. I don't take insult. I don't want to insult anybody. But I cannot tolerate unethical behavior. And that's what's going on with Hillary Clinton, as well as scripted rhetoric. Every time that she's caught doing something, she pleads the fifth or says, I don't recall, or says that someone else had did it before. Colin Powell did it before, so if he did it, I can do it. This is rhetoric that is meant to deflect from the real issue. And again, I think it's that scripted rhetoric and the offensiveness of it that has driven so many people to Donald Trump and why he succeeded in the primary. Next, we come to the big issue for this election on the national level. The issue for this election, beyond unethical behavior and scripted rhetoric, is national defense. We have some major issues going on in the world right now with terrorism, Islamic terrorism, and its spread. Last week on the show, if you had a chance to watch that, I had Joel Richardson on, who's a Middle East expert, and he talked about the root cause of Islamic terrorism really coming out of the Quran and coming out of the Middle East, and what this means for us. He talked about the problems of taking what's now called a multicultural or open border view of the world. We have to be very careful about our country, about borders, about immigration, because we have to protect ourselves at home. If there's something that's going to happen, a terrorist attack in the Middle East or some other country, we can't control that. That's not our country. Those folks control that and manage it. We help them. But we don't want that to occur here. So we have to be wise about our borders. Hillary Clinton has said that she favors open borders. Now, I don't know the context of that quote. Now, I do know that she is endorsed by George Soros and tied to George Soros, and certainly that's a very progressive movement that is about open borders. We cannot have that. Donald Trump, on the other side, has said we have to be careful and properly vet immigrants who come in here. He said, particularly if they're coming from a country that seems to be spawning terrorism, or with a worldview that seems to be foundational to terrorism. That's Islam. We do need to be careful. Now, there are many, many Muslims who are not terrorists, but there are many who are. and we need to be careful about that. I don't think that Hillary Clinton has a firm understanding of that, and I believe Donald Trump would be much better at protecting the United States and our own borders. National defense. We also have the issue of Iran nuclear contract, of course, and going back to the gubernatorial or to the Senate race, Hassan was in favor of the Iran contract, and I think that Kelly Ayotte realized it's not. We can't have someone who's cavalier about the threats that we face, whether it's in the White House or in the New Hampshire U.S. Senate seat. And again, I think that Hillary Clinton and Hassan are really on the same page. We need to protect the United States, protect our borders, and we want to get rid of unethical and scripted behavior. We're nearly out of time here, but there are a couple other races that I think are important. I want to take a very, very brief look at the race for Congress here in our part of the state. We've got incumbent Ann McLean Kuster being challenged by Jim Lawrence. Kuster, of course, is the Democrat, and Lawrence is the Republican candidate. I'm going to vote for Lawrence. I believe that some change is necessary. I believe that Kuster walks in lockstep with Obama. I believe that she would walk in lockstep with Hillary Clinton. And we don't want to have just scripted rhetoric. I think that she's going to follow the script. Again, going back to the Telegraph endorsement of Kelly Ayotte, it said that she has been a proven voice for bipartisanship in Washington. I think Jim Lawrence would also be able to be bipartisan in Washington, whereas I do not feel Ann Kuster is. So regardless of their party, I'm going to stick with Jim Lawrence. We have the Executive Council here in New Hampshire. We've got Dave Wheeler, incumbent, being challenged by Dan Weeks. Dave Wheeler, I think, is a practical, realistic guy. He understands costs. If I take a look at rail, for instance, that's a hot topic here in New Hampshire. Dan Weeks is very much in favor of rail. Many people are. Dave Wheeler, he hasn't. This is my impression of him. He may say that his position is a little bit different, but he's careful about rail. I think he wants to see real numbers that would justify it before just going ahead and doing it. My personal view is that we should phase it in. We should have rail that comes up to South Nashua, and of course Massachusetts would build that. And then we can see if there's really the ridership that would justify it. The numbers that are being touted by those who are in favor of the rail system really don't justify the cost. The numbers just aren't there. I want to do a show one of these days about rail specifically. But in that race, I'm going to be supporting Dave Wheeler. I think he's got a less partisan, a less scripted view of his job there. And I think that he serves the taxpayers better. Well, folks, we're out of time. And I want to thank you for tuning in today. This has been the 2016 Election Digest. We're just 10 days away from the national election here in November. And I hope this has been informative for you. If that person who was registering to vote, about whom I told the story earlier today, was listening, I hope this was informative. Because we do want to cast our votes with some knowledge about the candidates and some knowledge about the issues and some awareness of what's going on around us. And that's why we do this show. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.